Okay, we are in. Okay. Are you there, Catherine? I
I
see you.
certainly am. Good to see you or hear you.
I can see you. I can definitely see you. You're live
On,
on it.
on the YouTube, huh?
Yep, I can see it on YouTube. Look how fancy we are.
Thank God for modern technology to keep us all connected. We're
Okay, so I'm going. If they have questions, I'll just type it onto, and I'll come back on my iPad and type it into there. Okay.
That'd be great. And it would be great if I could see my audience too, if that's a possibility.
From the TV with the YouTube, I can try. I don't know. Is that a
Well,
feature?
not through that, but if you were to go on your iPad and be on the Zoom, you can kind of just pan the room and so I could see everybody and wave or whatever.
Say that one more time. If I go on my iPad,
Yep.
and so you want me to put stand my iPad up so everybody, so you can see everybody else.
Yeah, you could just show it around.
Oh, okay.
That'd be great.
So you want to see the people that are in the room.
Yeah, I don't have to see them the whole time, but just to
Okay.
kind of introduce myself.
Okay,
See
just
kind of who's out
let me
there.
get
Yeah.
okay, I gotta go back and they can all see you right now. So hold on, let me.
Good. Hey, everybody. I can't see you, but I'm here. Ready to go. At home, working remotely.
Okay.
Although I kind of wish I went into the office today because they have air conditioning and I don't have air conditioning.
Oh no.
I I
Oh,
I was one of those buyers that, has anybody seen the as seen on television stuff that you
the
can buy over all the years and decades now?
uh
Well,
huh.
I saw a product. It's called Arctic Air. And the
Oh
backstory,
Lord.
the backstory is,
I don't even need to hear the rest of it.
let's real quick. Because we have to find affordable ways of living, right? Where we live.
Mhm.
And so I am in an older house that doesn't have air conditioning and weird windows that really wouldn't hold the window air conditioner very well. So I said, I'll try this out. So it was a school teacher, they said, in Baltimore who had kids in a classroom on a hot day like today and no relief,
Mhm.
who came up with this little box, and you put a little filter in there that you put in the freezer for a little while so it gets chilled. And then you put it back in the box and then you turn the fan on and cool air comes out. So
Oh wow. Oh, that's cool.
I can't say it's air conditioning, but I do have cool air blowing on me at the moment. That's
With
all.
glitter.
Yes.
Why is it
So
asking me to?
I saw you a moment and then you disappeared.
Yeah, I took my keypad off, and it's saying that I can join the.
We got a whole lot going on today.
It's really weird. It
Okay.
shouldn't be a difference, but let me just connect it back, see what happens.
Okay. We've
I
got
don't know why it would
Shira
be different.
Wade on the line, and she's going to join us on her iPad so we can see all of our friends at the
I'm so
Hospitality
sorry.
Center here. I'm Catherine Freeman, and I work at Connecticut Legal Services, among other things. So I'm coming to you today with my friends over here at CHD. And we're going to talk a little bit about housing, right? What the life of housing law workshop. And Shakira is going to finish getting herself set up so I could see my audience, because I'm here on Zoom streaming on YouTube so that the audience can see us up on the big screen via YouTube at the Hospitality Center. So hopefully this will be the first of several discussions we can have around questions you might have around housing concerns, money to get into housing, right? That's always a concern, right? Where to get the funds to be able to get into housing, things like that. So this will be the first, hopefully, in a series of conversations.
Hey, Travis, I guess the only problem I'm having is they can see you,
Yep.
but my iPad is not letting me flip it back over. So I don't know if you
You're
want to
not,
talk to them
you're,
and hear
you're
them
not,
and get started on how I set this up.
you're actually not on in the Zoom via your iPad. At one point, there was a request that
Yeah,
came to get in, but then it
yeah,
disappeared.
that's what I'm trying to get on now. So you are still on YouTube. I'm trying to get you back on my
That's fine.
iPad.
That's fine. I'm not in too much of a rush. We're good for time.
Okay.
So I could talk till the cows come home. So I'll just fill in a few blanks here with everybody while Miss Shakira gets that technological aspect underway, because she's on the phone, so I can hear her via audio. You guys can see me on the YouTube. And so she's putting her iPad together so that I could see you guys at least briefly to see who's all there, see how everybody's doing. And again, we're going to be talking today about housing law a little bit, knowing your rights, knowing what to do when you get into housing. You know, in my experience in Waterbury, I would say people may get placed in housing that somebody might have helped them with it from an agency to get. And, especially with the pandemic, a lot of people were scrambling to try and find places to stay. And so maybe an agency helps with the security deposit, a couple months rent, and then you didn't know who the landlord was or who to talk to about a condition or things or expectations of what was expected being there. So this little workshop today is really the basics we're going to go over. And I have a PowerPoint, which actually I think I actually have to go back in and pull that back up. I pulled up a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't think I pulled up the PowerPoint. So while Shakira is logging in, I'm going to do that part.
What is the problem?
Back in here. And I'm gonna pull that up. So I'll be sharing my screen, which will have a PowerPoint. I've got a couple other things to show you as well. Let's go in here. PowerPoints are helpful because they kind of help you keep on track and not lose track of the substance of what you want to talk about. So I do always appreciate having the PowerPoint, but I do like to incorporate some other fun things in there as well. So let's see how we're gonna do that. I'm gonna go in here. How's everybody holding up with the heat today? Oops, go back. Okay, I got my PowerPoint ready to go. And we're gonna close out AOL, or we're gonna keep hearing that beeping sound, and that's no fun. All right, well, I'm going to continue on while Shakira tries to work on getting her iPad up and going, because that's what she's going to be putting in some questions for you that I'll be taking later on. So I'm going to try and spend about 30 minutes talking to you about housing, and then she'll field some questions for you all that she's going to put into the chat. And then we'll be done for today. And if maybe towards the end, if you guys have some ideas of other things you might want to chat with me about in a future one, we can also entertain that as well. Shakira, I see you coming on via your iPad. did not connect to the audio. I think we knew that it's just going to be video, not audio for that because you have the phone. Yep, and I see your desk. Yep, I see you, and she's going out to the audience in real time, everybody. There we go. There's everybody. Trying to stay cool, right? Show of hands, who's trying to stay cool today? I know I am. Anybody? Yep, everybody's just hanging in there. I see you over there. Hey, how you doing? It's hot out there. Everybody's staying hydrated? Who's got their water? Well, she's going back in the office. Okay. All right, Shakira.
All right, Catherine.
So it looks like we have
I'm
about
gonna
10 people.
Yeah. Well, roughly, yeah. They can hear you. Do you want to?
Okay, so where are you now?
I'm standing in front of the TV.
Okay, all right. Well, hey, are you staying hydrated? Show of hands, show of the water. It's so important because in this hot weather, I guess it's going to be hot for the next couple of days. But hey, like I said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about housing. I'm going to show you a couple of things. And I've got some noise background feedback. I guess that just goes with the territory. So I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint, Kira. I'm going to mute that. Okay. All righty. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. Again, my name is Catherine Freeman, and I am here with you today from Connecticut Legal Services. And hopefully we'll have some fun talking about this a little bit today. I know it's hot, it's late in the afternoon. You know, maybe we could get some engagement going, maybe stretch a little bit. There we go. All right. So home is a place, and that place should be a place of peace wherever you decide for your home to be, whether it's inside or outdoors. Just as a little backstory, you know, I grew up in the country, youngest of 5 kids, so we were required to spend an ample amount of time outdoors. It was very rare that our parents wanted us to come in the house. So I have an affinity for being outdoors. As a matter of fact, next week, I'll be spending half of the week living outdoors. It's called camping. So, you know, there is something to be said for being outdoors, looking up at the stars, and especially when the days when the weather is a little bit better, and being by a campfire and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, home is a place, and it should be a place where you find peace. I have some little clips that I want to try to share with you. Try to play around with some of this technology. See how successful I am with it today. Let me go back. Got to just go in here. Hold on, stop screen sharing real quick. So I encourage you to give questions or comments to Shakira throughout, as she'll put comments into the chat, and then I'll be able to respond that way. But just before I get too deep in, I did want you to know that, you know, this is a presentation today. This outline is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice, although I am an attorney. So it's not legal advice of any particular issue. This is just kind of a general overview of kind of some expectations that you should have in housing, and also just as a basic introduction. So I'm going to go back into here. Everybody has fun with technology these days. Let's see, look at this. Okay, I want to show this video. Well, let's just go back to the guy I know I can access, because I'm having some accessibility issues with that particular link, but I got another one I want to show you guys too. See if I can pull it up here. Alrighty. Bear with me here. Alrighty. Oops. I think my computer's not liking being hot either. Let's see, let's go there. And we're gonna go back into there. All right. Should to go back into the Zoom. Share my screen. Here we go.
If you thought peace meant nobody bothering you anymore, I'm here to tell you, you got your P's mixed up. You looking for a P-I-E-C-E. They sell those at Popeyes, and you can get as many of them as you want. 3-piece, 5-piece, 10-piece, 20 pieces, as much peace as you want, they got it. But if you're looking for real peace, peace does not come with quietness. Peace is the spiritual and the mental and the psychological ability for you to remain still when they acting a clown all around you. That's what peace looks like. If you thought peace meant
That's what
nobody
we're gonna be talking
bothering
about in
you
terms of
anymore,
your- Stop that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in terms of your housing is how do you get that peace when it comes to when you're going to have housing and when you get housed, right? So let me go back into the PowerPoint. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our organization and what we do and why we're here to help give this information to you. Okay. So again, I'm Catherine Freeman. I'm with Connecticut Legal Services. Our mission is in advancing justice. And when that comes to housing, that means that we work with clients to make sure that their housing is up to code. So, you know, talking them through the process of talking to health departments when places aren't up to code and getting places that are of a code standard for people to live in. Also means helping people access the justice system when a place is not up to code and they need to pay money into court to get a landlord to fix something so that they can continue living in that environment in a peaceful way, right? That's our key word for today is peace. And also in the instances where tenants find themselves facing an eviction for a number of reasons, that could be for falling behind in the rent. It could be because there's a new landlord and they no longer want that tenant there. And there's no more lease any longer. So they just say, we don't want to do a lease anymore. Or it could be situations where bad things happen, not only with the tenant, but maybe sometimes when they have a visitor that's not really that welcome, but that visitor might cause problems that could lead towards trying to end that relationship through an eviction. So we help tenants with those processes through the court system. And that's how we help to advance justice in the housing arena, among other ways. The mission of Connecticut Legal Services is to provide access to justice and protect critical civil rights of low-income individuals and families through representation, systemic advocacy, advice, collaboration, and education. This is actually for educational purposes, so this document should not be reproduced in any way. And again, this should not be considered as legal advice. This is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice on any issue. If you have a legal issue, you should contact an attorney for legal advice for your particular situation. Now, we may be asking you may be asking some questions today that Ms. Wade is going to put in the chat, and I'll be taking a look at those, but they should just be general questions, just like maybe like where to get information, stuff like that. And comments, like I said, later on, you can give comments about maybe some other subjects that you might want to discuss at a future one of these types of talks, okay? So about legal services in Connecticut. Again, we're a nonprofit law firm that provides free legal aid to low-income individuals and families. We're the largest legal aid agency in Connecticut, serving about 58% of Connecticut's poverty population in 122 communities. So we cover the state except for those areas of Hartford and New Haven. So we're right here in Waterbury. So I am actually the housing attorney right here in Waterbury over on Central Avenue, for those of you who know the area. We have offices in New London, Willimantic, New Britain, Bridgeport, Stamford, Waterbury, and then our main administrative office based in Middletown. We collaborate with our other sister organizations, like we were mentioning, Hartford and New Haven. So we have Greater Hartford Legal Aid that covers the Greater Hartford area. Then we have New Haven Legal Aid that covers New Haven. And then Statewide Legal Services is one of our sister organizations that's LLSC funded, which is federal funding. And they're able to actually screen people who call in with legal problems and determine which organization to send those legal problems to. So they're a great first line of assistance for us in screening our future clients. In terms of eligibility, typically our clients are eligible based on income, and it's usually based on a household income of about below 125% of the federal poverty guidelines. Now, right now, because of the pandemic, there are some exceptions. Like, for instance, we have a program that's being run by the Department of Housing called Unite CT that does afford for us to assist potential clients of a higher income than the 125% of federal poverty level. When we do take on a new case, we do have to do a conflict check. That's why when we do presentations like that, we can't actually just give direct legal advice, because we actually have to make sure that there's no conflict in us giving advice or representing based on whatever our past representation might have been. So we do have to run that. And that's done usually when somebody contacts us by either phone call for services or through our sister organization, Statewide Legal Services. They do that as well. But we always have to do a conflict check at Connecticut Legal Services. Our practice areas are housing, which I'm talking to you about today, family, public benefits, employment, health law, consumer, elder education, and juvenile law, social security, and immigration. We do not handle criminal cases, even though we might get walk-ins about criminal matters, or we might get phone calls about that. We absolutely don't handle a single criminal case, anything about probation, anything about violation of probation, stuff like that. We don't get into that stuff. So, all righty, making a house a home. Finding that peace, as we're talking about, the theme for today is peace, right? So you might have a situation where you're in an apartment, or maybe a room, or maybe you're subleasing a room or apartment, or maybe you're getting into temporary housing, or maybe you're going to be in a situation where you become live-in help, or you provide some services that allow you to live someplace. So these are some of the different types of ways of living. You know, me, for instance, I like to talk personally. I was live-in help when I was actually in law school. What does that mean? Well, after my first year of law school, where I absolutely couldn't even afford to live in Boston at all, I don't even know how I ended up there. I no money. I had to go to law school. I showed up with no place to live, but ended up finding a place the first year. The second year, I decided to be a live-in help. And how did I do that? I went to a board over at the main campus looking to see who needed help, because I told my friends, I was like, I can not afford to rent a place this school year. So been there, done that, live-in help. You know, I've, rented a room before. I've lived in apartments before. I've done a variety of these things here. This summer, I even had to sublease a place for 6 weeks because I had to be someplace else while my kid was doing something and I needed to be close by. So, there's all these different ways that you can make a home. The landlord-tenant relationship. Wow. So we're talking about apartment rooms or leases, right? Oral versus written. So an oral lease, that's word, mouth to mouth, right? You talk to the person about your plans to live in the place, right? So you might have a month to month. Rent can be raised each month. Each month there's a new month. That could be a discussion, or that could come up where the landlord wants a new rent. The landlord can opt not to renew at the end of a given month with the proper notice, and may ask you to move at the end of a month. And then the tenant needs not give a notice if the tenant decides to move at the end of a month. The landlord cannot charge late fees or attorney's fees if they're going to say, like, for instance, landlord cannot charge late fees or attorney's fees. If there's nothing documented saying that they can collect late fees or attorney's fees. That's why it's saying that there. So there's nothing in writing. It's an oral agreement. Then you get your written agreement, right? You get your fixed rent for a period The tenant's responsible for remainder of the rent on the lease if he or she breaks the lease. It may include late charge fees, as was compared to an oral, and payment of fees for evictions, like attorney's fees, costs, things like that, that are spelled out in a written agreement. Now, when it comes to the landlord-tenant relationship, these are things to look out for. Once you get into housing, right, you don't want to be locked out. What does that mean? Like, well, sometimes you get into a apartment situation, and then maybe a project manager, property manager you don't get along with, or something like that, might start telling you, you know what, you should just move. You know, maybe you have a complaint that there's bugs in your apartment. Maybe you have a complaint that they're not taking the garbage out. And sometimes a property manager or somebody might say to you, oh, well, why don't you just move? Just get out, move out. No, you have rights. You don't just have to listen to what that person's saying to get out, right? And same thing, they might say, well, you know, you're behind in the rent, you haven't paid, you know what, I'm just gonna change the locks and you're gonna just have to get out of here. Well, that's just not true in Connecticut and many other states, right? That you don't have to just get out. That's called a lockout. If a landlord, if you actually already are living in a place lawfully and the property owner tries to lock you out. So it's not allowed in Connecticut. Only a judge can issue an order to get out. That's through the eviction process. And lockouts in Connecticut are criminal offenses. And as you can see there, we cite the law, which is Connecticut General Statute. That's what CGS stands for. And that's sections 47A43 to 47A49 of our statutes that lay out the process for complaining about a criminal lockout and getting a property owner arrested for a criminal lockout. So what do you do if that happens, right? If you ever get threatened with a lockout, you call the police immediately. These are the times when something like that happens. It's always good to have on you proof that you actually live there. So maybe you have a bag or something where you would keep in your bag, you know, ID that has the address for where you're living, or a utility bill or some type of bill that you might have that comes to where you're living to show proof that you actually belong there or live there. And that could be a situation that comes up where maybe you end up living with somebody else who's the primary person on the lease, but you end up living there. You would want to have proof that you actually belong there too if you were living with somebody else for a period of time and then asked to leave. So you would want to keep that kind of proof on you. So when the lockout or entry and detainer action, you begin that process to complain if you were ever put out of a place without going through the eviction process. There's forms or online at our judicial branch website. So yeah, our judicial branch website has a lot of forms that are very user-friendly and accessible that you fill in when you're at a computer to help you through many processes, and lockout and entry and detainer is one of those. And there's probably some other ones that we'll talk about here too. If, for instance, you do go through the process of a lockout someday, the landlord is responsible for paying damages. So, you know, when people are locked out, they typically lose their property, right? Their property's in the unit and they're not in the unit. And so those things are valuables. They are of value and cost. And a tenant can say what the value of those things were that they lost or had damaged as a result of a lockout, and can get relief for that as well. Now, the landlord-tenant relationship, right? So this is something we want to talk about a little bit more, right? So when you get into a landlord-tenant relationship at some point, you're going to be paying rent, right? So maybe that first couple months you don't, right? You might get security deposit assistance and you might get a couple months rent, but you're going to want to put that on a calendar, right? Once you get situated, you'll have a either in your phone that you might have that has a calendar in it, or maybe an actual calendar that you can keep on you so you can start keeping track of when you need to make your payments, right? So in Connecticut, under Connecticut General Statute 47A15A, it lets you know that a month long lease, it has a 9-day statutory grace period. So that means that you have to pay the rent by the 10th of the month, no later and before the 11th, right, of that month. Or if you have a week-to-week lease, because sometimes people have week-to-week rentals, then your rent is due by the 5th day of that week for a weekly lease. After that, you're late and you're subject to being evicted. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a written agreement, then there shouldn't be any late fees until after the 10th of the month or after the 5th day of the week if it's a week-to-week. Right? So how does that work? So Connecticut General Statute 47A3A talks to you a little bit about, you know, you pay at the place you agreed to by parties. A lot of times these days people are paying electronically. And the key thing I want to talk about is just making sure you're keeping track of how you paid. You should never be giving money to a landlord like in cash without any proof that you actually paid. And then you have to find a place to actually keep track of those receipts and things if you end up getting receipts. So if you make an electronic payment, then you'll have electronic record. It's important to keep that anytime you're in a place. And then if you pay by cash and you have a receipt, you'll have the receipt. Now, another tip is what I would say is if you end up getting a receipt, if you have a phone that can take pictures, take a picture of that receipt every month. That way you have pictures of your receipts saved in a device that you can access, and you can try to make sure you keep track of, what you have saved. Sometimes people save stuff to what's called a thumb drive. I don't think I have one here on my desk, but if you're tech savvy like that and you want to end up saving, you can save your items to a thumb drive. I'm not the best tech person, so you do have to be careful when you do save stuff to technology, because it's not accessible into perpetuity as far as I know. There are ways that it could be lost, but it's another means of just keeping track of your payments, right? So if you pay by cash, again, receipt. If you pay by check, you should be getting a copy of the canceled check back from your checking account. Nowadays, most of the banks are not sending back the hard check. They're usually sending a picture of the check that you sent on the back of your statement. So you want to hold on to your statements to keep track of that during your tenancy. And then of course, money orders, you're going to give the money order to the landlord. And then you have that stub that keeps track of the number of the money order. And then you can write in there how much was paid and all that. So you have that copy of that record of the stub. Again, if you give money orders and you have the stub, that's great. But if you have a phone that can take pictures, then you should take a picture of that money order and keep that as part of your record, just as an ounce of prevention to protect you down the road, and just to kind of help keep things organized if you do have a camera phone where you're able to do something like that. So yeah, write rent in full for the month of whatever month that is, and you've paid the rent in full on a check or a money order. You can write that on there for what month that is, so it's very clear that that covered a particular month. Unfortunately, sometimes people, what we call rob Peter to pay Paul. And so they might pay in increments, which can get a little bit confusing. So you wouldn't be able to, if you're paying in increments, you wouldn't be able to put on one specific increment rent paid in full, because you're paying in increments. But the key thing is to try to find the best way to keep track. And you really should work with somebody if you have a hard time keeping track of things like that, a counselor or advisor who could assist you in keeping those things organized. And it's fine, just if you can find someone who can assist with that. If that's not your strength, then have that person remind you and or help you to sort that out. Again, get the receipt if you're paying cash. Keep all your rent money orders and check receipts, as I mentioned. All right, back to that landlord-tenant relationship, right? So again, when you get your home, if it's an apartment or a place where you're sharing or subletting or what have you, or working for somebody in exchange for living arrangements, you want that peace, and you want to figure out the best way to maintain that peace that you want in your homes, right? So maintenance is a huge one, right? Especially here in Waterbury. We've got an older housing stock here, I noticed, and a lot of these places have a lot of equipment and things like that are at the end of their useful life and need to be replaced. So a landlord has an obligation under Connecticut General Statute 47A7A to maintain the property, right? What does that mean? They have to comply with the health and building codes, right? So we've got health departments and we got building departments in every major town throughout Connecticut. They're accountable back to the state for state health and building codes. That these things have to be kept to a certain standard. We have inspectors that go out statewide to look at these things and address these things. And so the property owners must comply with these things. They must make repairs to keep the place livable, maintain heating, electric, and plumbing systems, maintain provided appliances, provide trash containers, etc. So what does that mean? If you get moved into all right, you might go and look at a place initially, you might be in a rush to get into a place. And, generally it looks okay. You took a glance, it got approved by whatever agency is assisting you to get in. But it's okay to take a closer look and to keep track of things and to address any problems right away. You don't have to wait a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. You don't have to wait any amount of time to have these things addressed. And with technology today, if you end up having a a phone that you can use to text message your landlord, that's great, because now you've got electronic log of when you're letting them know that there's a problem. Some landlords, they have property managers and they have their own computer system where you have to log into the system and put in what's going wrong. You want to do that at the first sign of things that are being a problem, because we don't want to do what's called self-help, right? We don't want to get you placed someplace and then there's a problem in 3 or 4 months. And then now you might think, oh, well, I'm just not going to pay the rent because, you know, this faucet's been leaking and it's been keeping me up at night. I can't sleep, I can't rest, and, you know, things like that. So I'm not going to pay the rent because they're not coming to fix it. No, we don't want to do that. There's a process, and we're going to continue on here to talk about that process, right? So landlords also must fix peeling paint, dangerous to health, and remove lead. Unfortunately, in Connecticut, we again have very old housing stock, particularly I would say in Waterbury. And so you will regularly see peeling paint. You will regularly see situations where it's lead. Pretty much the presumption should be, if it's peeling, it's an older house in Connecticut, it's lead. Like that's just should be a going presumption. And the landlords can do whatever they need to do to remediate that, and should do it. They should do it prior to you moving in, but because it's older housing stock, sometimes things wear and tear fast. And so they need to kind of go back in and remedy that. So be careful. Non-compliance by landlord is not grounds to withhold rent, which is what I was talking about earlier. Only the most serious violations can be grounds to withhold rent. And I have not run across a situation where it's the most serious of violations. I mean, I would think that the roof would have to be caved in or something like that. So you always want to err on the side of caution. Don't take the law into your own hand. I'm sure you guys have heard that, especially before, right? Don't take the law into your own hands. Follow the process, and the process will be there to support you. And it'll give you a leg up, right? You never want to be on the defensive end of any legal concern. You want to be on what we call the offensive. Who here is into basketball, right? Offense, defense, right? So you want to be on the offense when it comes to protecting your peace where you're living at, not on the defense, right? Okay. How are we doing out there? All right, the landlord-tenant relationship. For anybody who's else is watching this in the universe, I can't see my audience. I know they're out there. I saw them at the beginning. There's 10 of you out sitting around. I appreciate you at watching, trying to stay cool. And one of the ladies on here, again, my name's Catherine Freeman. I'm from Connecticut Legal Services, talking to you today about housing basics, right? So the landlord-tenant relationship, it continues. Hold on, I have my printed out here. I'm just gonna jump there because that way I know if I need to pick up the pace or if I'm on a good pace here. I think I'm doing all right though. No, I got a lot here. All right, I'm gonna read faster for about another 15 minutes. And hold on one second. Uh-oh. Let's see what we got going on in the chat. You have the, hey, yeah, thanks, Shakira. So far, so good. I hear you. Thank you. I appreciate the commentary. It helps. All right, so the essential services of Connecticut General Statutes 47A13. What are we talking about? Landlord must provide water, of course, heating equipment, of course, and electric service, of course. How many of you have lived in a place that didn't have proper water, didn't have proper heating equipment, didn't have proper electric services? Show of hands. Show of hands. Yeah. I'm sure. I know somebody besides me is holding up their hands. It happens. It does happen, but things have to be corrected, right? If not fixed promptly upon notice to landlord, tenant may fix on his or her own. Tenant may move to a temporary housing. The tenant can complain to health officials, and that the unit may be condemned if the health officials go in and see it's bad enough. I worked in a number of places, Hartford a lot for many years up until recently, and in that instance, there's like a couple of inspections, so they've never condemned a place at all. So place has to be kind of pretty bad to get condemned, because they don't want people to end up in the street. They'd rather have them stay in a place that's not okay, but could use some work to get fixed, so people don't end up on, out in the street with the temporary housing at the hotel, and then the hotel runs out after $5,000 and all that stuff. So it's not a common thing, I would say, for places to get condemned these days. It's really an expectation for stuff to get fixed, right? Utilities, again, under Connecticut General Statute 19A 109 and Connecticut General Statute 16-262E, the landlord may not willfully interfere with your essential utilities. What does that mean? No, they can't go in and be like, oh, you didn't pay the rent, we're cutting off the water, we're cutting off the heat, we're playing games. No, that stuff is criminal, and a person needs to contact police right away if something like that's happening. Unfortunately, sometimes you just get so overwhelmed and you got so much going on, you don't realize like, oh, I really should call the police to get involved, or sometimes you just don't want the police involved, right? A lot of us don't want the police involved in our everyday lives, but the landlords can't be doing these things where you're not having the utilities where you need to be at, and they need to fix the problem, and you got to work with them to help, perhaps fix the problem somehow if there's an underlying problem, because we want to maintain that peace, right? Peace. Home is a place of peace. Tenant must have exclusive use of his or own utilities. What does that mean? That means that if you have a unit and you're paying electricity, that you shouldn't be paying for electricity in the hallway, down in the laundry room that's down on another floor, for the basement and all these other places. You're only supposed to be paying the electrical inside your unit. And you should know based on your bills, whether that's reasonable for the size of the unit that you have. And sometimes you got to ask around. You could ask a caseworker or something like this. My electric bill's, $150. Does that make sense for, a 1-bedroom unit? So kind of have to ask around sometimes and make sure that you're protected. Consequences if landlord fails to maintain the unit. Well, we talked briefly earlier about payment into court action. What does that mean? That means that instead of you doing self-help of withholding the rent, you actually, if there's a problem with the unit, you actually contact the health department, have them do an inspection. The landlord has 21 days to fix the problem. If 21 days goes by, then the next time that the rent is due, you deposit that rent money to the court in what's called a payment into court action. Eventually, you may pay a couple of months of rent into the court, and eventually the court will address what things were problematic, whether they got fixed or not. And then the judge decides what happens with that rent. Does the rent now go to the landlord if things are fixed, or does the rent go to the tenant because absolutely nothing's been fixed? And that's really up to the judge's discretion to decide. Payment into court action is there. It's viable. It's not a service that we provide at Legal Service. It is included in the pamphlets that I left for you. So I left you a couple of sets of pamphlets there that you can pick and choose from to take with you. Take it home with you today when you leave. I think you guys close at 4:30. It's something to keep on yourself, and maybe something to read in your spare time, or just to have on hand. Maybe you become the local expert for your friends of who to contact. I mean, it's good to have that information, I think. Anyway, and at least by following the procedures, right? Written notice of breach, or 15 days to correct, basically saying like there's proper ways to end the lease if there's problems. That just talks about the process. Penalties, fines, and criminal complaints by code officers for violations. That's right. So if a code enforcement goes to a property, even the fire department, if they go to a property and they find violations, those things have to be fixed. And if they're not fixed in the time that's allotted by either the fire department or the health department, then it can be a criminal case, and it could be a potential for arrest involved of the property owner if they don't take care of it. That's how serious this is, because you're really talking about life, health, and safety, right? You never want to be in a building that's unsafe. It could cause a fire, and nobody wants to be subjected to a fatal fire, right? The landlord-tenant relationship continued. I want to talk about too. Tenant's responsibility, right? This is key, right? So perk up, stand up. There we go. Pause for a second. Okay, we have this here, and we also have information like this over at ctlawhelp.org. That's a really great resource website that's been put together through the Legal Services Operations. Again, that's ctlawhelp.org, that talks about some of this and a whole bunch of other legal rights that you have and a lot of the subject areas that I mentioned that we cover. But tenants' responsibilities are laid out in our statutes too, 47A11, right? We got to pay that rent on time, right? So again, you might end up in a place where maybe they pay security deposit and a couple months rent, but then after maybe by that third month, you're on your own to make sure that rent gets paid. And then the 4th month, 5th month, 6th month, 7th, and so on and so forth. So you got to make sure it gets paid on time. Rent is typically due on the 1st of the month, and then you have that grace period. We call that a grace period through the 10th. But man, it's really great if you could get your rent paid on the first of the month, or when you receive funds, right? Because a lot of times folks are getting money maybe on the first or the third. But to make sure that that's really high on the list of priorities of getting paid among everything else that you have to be responsible for, right? Again, you have to obey housing codes to keep unit clean and safe, not willfully damage the unit, follow lease obligations and responsibilities. You'll know those from having reviewed your lease before you signed it. Obey the written landlord rules. The rules have to be attached to the lease. They can't just make up any rules. They should have the rules attached to your lease when you first move in. Allow other peaceful enjoyment of premises and not engage in criminal activities. Violations may be grounds for eviction, fines, and criminal charges. I'm going to stop sharing this screen for 1 second because I want to go to another one that talks about this a little bit more. And we're going to go back into shared screen, and let's see if I see it here. Oh wait, I gotta go back out real quick here. Take a breather. What do you guys think so far while I look for this document? Close that out. Probably gonna end with this part today, which means we went halfway through the presentation. So we definitely should do a second one so we can finish up talking a little bit more about different things like rent increases and rights of the elderly and disabled and security deposits. And what else? Ending the lease, right? How to go about it, what things to do when you end the lease. Discrimination in housing and other resources. So yeah, we're probably going to do a part 2. All right, we're going to go back in here so I can, no, I didn't want to do that. That's what I want there. Okay, we're going to go back and share the screen again. I hope this is just another version of things that renters should do. I liked this one because I think it delved in a little bit better than the other screen that I was sharing. And then we're going to wrap up with questions and follow up for the rest of the day. So let's see, things you, the renter, must do, right? Follow all, you guys can see the screen, right? I think I'm screen sharing. Yes. Follow all housing and fire codes that apply to you. Keep your apartment clean and safe, including sinks, toilets, tubs, and appliances. Peace, right? Bringing that peace to your situation. Put all the trash in the appropriate containers. So when you move into a place, find out where the trash goes, find out what day the trash goes out, you know, so you're kind of timing it well with when the trash goes out and before everybody else also, you know, fills the trash over the top and stuff like that. That can get crazy. Use all the services and facilities such as the elevator, the laundry room, and the heating reasonably. What does that mean, right? Basically they're saying like, don't abuse the stuff, right? Don't destroy, damage, or take any property or allow anyone else to do so. That means like, don't have people come over that you think might damage the property because that's their personality sometimes. You may have to pay the landlord if you and your family or your guests cause damage that is more than normal wear and tear. What's normal wear and tear? Well, things get dirty over time. There might be stray marks that happen over time. You know, but that's for another day. They're just saying don't damage the place, right? Take responsibility for the way your guests behave when they are visiting you. This is huge. This is really huge. This one right here. And it's tough because it's like we could control ourselves, but sometimes it's like you want to hang with some of your friends, and we'll use the word knucklehead, right? I think that's fair. Sometimes it could be, you know, some knuckleheads that you might know who, you know, you think it's innocent, like maybe they're coming over and then all of a sudden they do something really weird and you weren't expecting that. And then it gets awkward for you and you don't even know what to make heads or tails of it. So you got to be responsible for your guests. And sometimes just to maintain your peace, you know which friends you just can't have, you just know you can't have over. I mean, shoot, I got people who don't even know where I live. Right? I don't want them to know where I live because I don't want them to come over, right? Because I don't want to disturb my peace. You know, it's all you got is your peace. So for example, if there's no smoking in your buildings and your guest smokes, you could find yourself in trouble, right? If there's a no smoking policy and auntie decides she's going to come over and she's going to be over for 12 hours, you know, she smokes. she's gonna have to leave and go to the store and have her smoke on the way to the store, not smoke there and cause you problems. Yeah, there are problems that you could correct, because that would be a lease violation that you have to correct. You have like 15 days to correct lease violations, but sometimes you gotta think about how to prevent the event from even being a problem in the first place. Do not disturb your neighbors or allow any of your guests to do so. Okay, well, that's pretty broad, right? Music, right? Music's a big one. And it varies from town to town. I was living in Hartford, and we ended up having a noise ordinance. It's actually a 24-hour-a-day noise ordinance, but generally, it should be quiet after 10 o'clock, typically in that neighborhood. Every neighborhood is different, and not everybody has the same level of respect, but whatever your piece is, you got to bring to that the level of respect that's required for you to maintain your peace, right? And sometimes you don't find the right neighborhood. You get into a place and maybe you visited in the day, and now you're finding out in the nighttime that how it really is. And that's not the neighborhood for you. Well, as long as you're maintaining that lease, then you can plan and plot to go and find another place that's going to end up being better for you, and working with a worker that can help you to sort that out too, right? So it's all about talking and communicating with the workers too, that can help to facilitate for you what's the best peaceful environment for you in the best way. So you continue to be on the offense and not the defense, right? So let's obey the landlord's rules. If they are reasonable, clear, apply to all tenants, and you were told about them when you got it in writing, when you moved in, right? Pay the rent, even if your apartment needs repairs. Let's go back to the paperwork. Hey, not everybody wants to sit around reading the paperwork. I went to school to read this stuff all day. If reading is not your thing, give it to somebody who can read it for you and talk back to you about it. Like, hey, what is this talking about? Or, I have this list of rules. I'm getting, complaints about this. Talk to somebody, they can read it to you, and you can have that conversation to get a better understanding about it and kind of give you the peace of mind that you're, in the game with that. Pay your rent, even if your apartment needs repairs, unless the court says otherwise, right? We talked about that already. And we have the pamphlet, tenants' rights and repairs. I think that is a pamphlet I gave you too. There's 2 pamphlets there. So please help yourself to those pamphlets. Again, you might not need those today, but you could tuck them in your backpack or your other bag. So you have them on you. Read it in your spare time. Just have it on you for whenever. Today, next year, 5 years from now. You could have that with, your important papers that you keep, just so you have a little bit of information, kind of like your own personal paper library that you can have on you. And let the landlord into your apartment if the request to go in is reasonable, right? What does that mean? And we didn't talk about that maybe another day. Once you're in a place, right, there are going to be times that repairs need to be done. You're going to need to let the landlord come in and do those repairs. Should be at an agreeable time for both parties. Excuse me. The only time the landlord can be going into your apartment without advance notice is if there's an emergency, of course, right? If there was like a gas leak. I think yesterday in the town of Cromwell by this fancy golf course, there was a huge gas leak. So like anybody who was home needed to get out of there. They had so many firefighters there. So of course, in an emergency, a landlord or another party may need to get into that apartment to address something. But otherwise, it should be a mutual understanding coming in and out of the unit. And no, you don't have to allow someone to come into the unit when you're not there, right? That's a real thing. And I'll give you an example. It's like life is a true example of what happens, and I'll keep it brief. And we're going to finish up here. If you have questions, note them in the comments and I'll field those questions. My kid's father had people come in to do work in his apartment. Fine, cool. There was something wrong with the door, whatever. Did the work. A couple months go by. My kids went to go play with their video games. I think it was the video games. Yeah, video games. They went in and all the discs for the video games were gone. So the actual video game case was there, but the actual disc were not in there. And so that was super slick because you wouldn't think like, oh, okay, the discs are there, nobody touched it, right? But no, they took them out of the case and then the cases were left there. And it was like 10 or more that got taken. So, and my kids were really little then when that happened. So it was a little upsetting for them. So, you know, protect your stuff. If you want to be there when somebody's doing repairs, you have the absolute right to be there to protect your space, your things, and your peace. So today's session was about home basics. I hope you liked that. I interspersed a few things there. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen there, but I'm going to show one other thing while I field some questions or comments. So I can come back again the next time and talk to you again, continue a little bit more on the subject of continuing about rent increases and things like that, and ending the lease when you're deciding to move and what things like that, and housing discrimination, protecting yourself from that, and a couple other things that we could talk about at a future session. And I'm just going to show you this one other thing in addition to the pamphlets that you have available to you there that I want you to take. Second, I'm going to go back into, I want to go back to this page. Show of hands, who is technologically savvy? Who likes to get on the computer? Anybody? I can't see your hands, but I like to just interact still like I can see your hands. Hold on 1 second here. Hopefully I saw a show of hands. I think the library is still allowing people to schedule times to go use the computers at the library. I don't know if you guys have a computer there. Theoretically speaking, only 7% of Americans don't have access to the internet. I thought that was a low number. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they're claiming. But if you do have access to the internet, even if it's on a phone, here's the place to be. If you don't have a phone, there's even a link on this page to make sure you can access a phone. I don't know if I can see it here. Let's see. I think it might be on another page, but I ran across that when I was looking for something, and it has the numbers in here. Like if you need to get a phone, you could get a phone for yourself. It might not be a smartphone, but it's a phone. But I wanted to point out this page to you, ctlawhelp.org. I was reading from that earlier ago about general tenant expectations of when you're living in a place. This is a great site to go to. You can write this on the back. Actually, I think it might already be on the back of your pamphlet. If not, you can write that down, or Ms. Wade can take it down for ctlawhelp.org. This is our major resource for self-help, things about COVID. Most questions that you have that don't have nothing criminal, right? We don't deal with criminal, but everything that's like civil around the housing, the benefits, employment, social security, stuff like that is on here that you can have access to the information. So I highly recommend this being a starting place for you when you have questions or when you're working even and you all can, of course, 211. That's obviously our statewide information hub for where if you have concerns about accessing housing, weather conditions are bad and you need a place, aside from where you're at today, calling 211 for support information that you might need, right? And Shakira had one thing she was telling me. Let's see. All right. Thank you so much to you, Shakira, for having me. Let me know when we're going to do the next one. Maybe next month around the same time at the end of the month, we'll do part 2. I don't know if you have any questions or comments. Please let everyone have access to the pamphlets that I dropped off last week. And is there anything else? You want to give me one last, probably not. You won't be able to. I was gonna say you want to give me one last view of the room from your iPad, but I don't want you to have to go through a 5-minute fiasco trying to do that. So you could come on the audio, say a few things before we hop off. That'd be great. All right, well, I'm not sure if you're gonna be hopping back on. I'm gonna do one more thing before I go, because I wanna finish where I started with this for today. So Shakira, if you're trying to get on to say a few final things, that's great. In the meantime, I'm gonna work on this one final tech aspect to say my goodbyes. Like I said, I wanna finish off where I started at.
If you thought peace meant nobody bothering you anymore,
Oh, boy.
I'm here to tell you.
All right. There's so much inspiration on the internet that, you know, a lot of us who are in isolation need that inspiration of what's going on in the internet world. Let's see. There she is. So she's waving her goodbyes. I think that means there's no audio. She's looking great. She's looking fabulous. She's running the world. Am I muted? Oh yeah, you can hear me, but yeah, I won't be able to hear you, I think is the finale on that. She's got strength. She's honest. She's dedicated. She's blessed, thankful, and all that good stuff. And I want to thank her for that. And I'm going to share this again as we close out. All right, let's see if we can do that. What did I do? Close that out. One final reminder that housing is our peace.
Anymore, I'm here to tell you. You got your P's mixed up. You looking for a PIECE. They sell those at Popeyes. And you can get as many of them as you want. 3-piece, 5-piece, 10-piece, 20 pieces, as much piece as you want. They got it. But if you're looking for real peace, peace does not come with quietness. Peace is the spiritual and the mental and the psychological ability for you to remain still when they acting a clown all around you. That's what peace looks like. If you thought peace.
All right. All right. Till the next.